Why is supplementation important today? And I think a lot of that has to do with how we're raised. If you go back to, the farm days when they were pumping the water out of a well, they didn't have to supplement because they had all of their minerals right there. And then they were basically eating a much healthier diet. We've been told for, I think, the last 40 years that, fat is bad for us. Fat is an essential macro. Protein's an essential macro. And then you have carbohydrates. The body doesn't necessarily need carbohydrates. The body can live on protein and fat alone. But, when we were eating whole foods, when we were drinking well water, you probably didn't need to supplement. You had everything you really needed for longevity. But you have these micronutrients, and you can't get all the micronutrients from the processed food and from the bottled water. Most bottled water, not all of it, but by and large, most bottled water is just H2O, and there's no nutrients in it whatsoever. There's no minerals in it whatsoever. So where humans, where we used to get almost 100% or say 90%, 80% of our minerals was the water, now we're getting zero. And so if you don't replace those minerals, you're going to have a lot of issues. Well, like magnesium, right? Magnesium has been shown to help lower blood pressure. So if you have a magnesium deficiency, you're most likely going to have high blood pressure, and there's probably a whole other host of issues that you're going to have. So it's very difficult to get the nutrients from our food. The soil's also being depleted of nutrients because we're continually farming the same land over and over and not, rotating crops like we should. Most of us are completely deficient, especially in minerals, probably the worst, but depending on what we're eating, we can be deficient in almost all of them. So how does somebody choose a supplement? That's a really good question because, I've been in the industry for almost 15 years. There's a lot of shenanigans that are played, and you really have to trust who you're having or who you're buying from. And, some companies are very trustworthy and some are not. And unless you're in the industry, you don't necessarily know who's trustworthy and who's not. Just because somebody puts, GMP, approved on their product doesn't necessarily mean that the product is GMP approved. There's different levels to that. For instance, every company that manufactures nutritional products by the federal law has to be GMP compliant. And GMPs are just good manufacturing practices. But there's two federal laws that cover nutritional products, one specific to food. So like if you have a protein product and it says nutritional facts, that falls under the food compliance law. If you have a nutritional supplement facts, then that falls under the dietary ingredients regulations. And one of the things I hear all the time is like the nutrition industry is not regulated, and that's like saying the pharmaceutical industry is not regulated or the food industry is not regulated. If you were to look at it in tiers, obviously the pharmaceutical is the most regulated, and then the next most regulated would be the nutrition industry, and then the least regulated of the three would be food, like human consumption. And then if you want to go the next less regulated, you would go to like pet food. So pet food is very unregulated, and there's a lot of very bad horror stories on that side of it. But so food for human consumption is more regulated than pet food, and then supplements are even more regulated. The problem is, and I think the reason people are saying it's not regulated, is because anybody can go set up in their basement, in a shop, wherever they want. You can buy presses, manual presses. You can make your own pills. You can put whatever in there you want, and you can say it's vitamin C, for instance. You can create a label. You can put on your label that it's GMP compliant, and it's all a lie and it's all illegal. But you can go do that. Now, you can't sell that product on Amazon. So I would say, one of the indicators, if you're going to buy a product, I would probably look to buy it on Amazon first, because right now, Amazon, of all the online sources, Amazon provides the consumer the most protection. So if you're not an FDA registered facility and you don't have, at least test results that you can submit, you're not going to get your product on Amazon. And if you do, it's not going to be on there very long. They're going to snag it pretty quick. So I would say one thing is like look at Amazon. The other thing is to try to look at some of your other like lab testing. So you can go to LabDoor. I typically like LabDoor the best for testing. And I like it because typically you don't get to select what product you send them, they do most of the selection themselves. So they're buying random products from the market, and then they're testing those products, and then whatever the results are, the results are. Whereas some of these other industries, maybe that are more popular, I know you have NSF, those are like accepted by the professional sports industries, except Major League Baseball only takes NSF certification. But with those, you pay a lot of money to have your product certified, and then there's a lot of counterfeits I've seen, and I've never had a good way to, Like with NSF specifically, I've seen companies that say they're NSF certified, and then I go to the NSF website, I can't find it. So I don't know if they're really certified or if they're not certified, or at least with LabDoor, it's a lot easier to find. So, that's part of it. And then the other thing I would do is ask the company for the test data. So in other words, like when a supplement company makes, so when we receive products, we have to put a hold on those products. There's like a quarantine area, and then we have to take samples of that product. We send it out to an outside lab, and they're verifying that what we think it is or what we bought is what it is. So, if we bought the amino acid, L-arginine, we take a sample of it, we keep it quarantined, it goes to an outside lab, and then the outside lab compares that sample to a source of L-arginine with a, spectrometer, and they say, yes, this is or isn't L-arginine. And then we also have them measure like heavy metals. We'll have them measure yeast, mold, bacteria. And then once we get all the results back, which usually take a couple weeks, then we can put that material into production. And then even after we manufacture the products, we have to do final testing on the products as well. Usually you don't do identity testing on your final product because it's a mix generally of different products, but you do also a like yeast, bacteria, mold, usually an annual heavy metal and an annual identity type testing. And then you'll also do organoleptic testing. So you'll taste it, you'll have a group smell it, taste it. So if you're making, say, chocolate whey protein isolate, after you do all your test results, it's kind of at the same time, you take a sample, you have a group of people taste it. Does this taste like the standard for our whey isolate, for our chocolate whey isolate, that type of thing. And so a lot of those things, if you ask, you should just be able to email any company and say, hey, can I see your test data? And it might take them a couple days to get it, but most companies that are legit, even if they're not maybe on NSF's website or anything, if they're legit and they're on Amazon and they're giving you the data, that's usually a pretty good sign. It's like, yeah, you could fudge the data. Most people I don't think are doing that. And then the other thing I would probably look at a little bit is, and maybe it's not a deciding factor, but maybe it's just a factor, is who's manufacturing the product. So there's probably less than 500 companies around the United States that actually do the manufacturing. So on almost all products you see, it's going to say manufactured for. And if you see manufactured for, that's a tell that's saying that this company is not manufacturing their own products. And like I said, that's probably 90% or more of the companies out there. So I would maybe do a little deeper dive on those companies. Some of the more legitimate companies, they do all their own manufacturing, and then that they've had control of the product from the beginning to the end. 100% of that product's being tested, because it'd be really easy. Because my company, we do some co-packing, and we do the same testing on our co-pack products as we do on our own products. But in addition to that, the companies we co-pack for are supposed to be doing testing on everything that we give them, because they have to be able to validate what we're giving them. Don't take my word for it, test it.